Hey there, I'm Celine. And let me tell you, there's nothing more painful than realizing your own family never saw you as their equal. For years, I gave everything to them, paid their bills, covered their debts, and made sure everyone was taken care of. I thought that's what family was about. But then, I found out the truth. My father had created a trust fund, just for my sister, $1 million safety net, hidden away while I was left to struggle. While I was led to believe we had nothing, and when I finally confronted them, they expected me to keep paying. The house? Mine to cover. My sister's lifestyle? Still my problem. But when I said no, that's when the real war started. They froze my accounts, tried to sue me, lied to the rest of the family to turn them against me. And the worst part, I never saw it coming. I thought I was part of this family, but I was just their personal ATM. So, what would you do? Would you keep paying? Would you walk away? Because let me tell you, the moment I stopped, everything changed. And if you want to hear just how far they went to keep me under their control, you're gonna want to hear the rest of this story. The moment I pulled up to the Draven family's vacation home in Lake Michigan, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. The house itself hadn't changed, large bay windows reflecting the soft glow of the evening sky, the smell of pine and lake water filling the crisp air. It should have felt familiar, comforting even. But lately, these family gatherings had lost their warmth. I stepped inside, greeted by the scent of rosemary and garlic from my mother's cooking. Eleanor stood at the kitchen counter, stirring a pot with slow, measured movements. She glanced up and gave me a small, tight smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. In the dining room, my father, Cormac, was already seated at the head of the long wooden table. His posture was straight, shoulders squared, the kind of stance that silently demanded authority. Vesper sat across from him, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I took my usual seat, and for a moment, the clinking of silverware and the occasional murmur of conversation created an illusion of normalcy. But beneath it, I could feel it, the tension lurking just beneath the surface. Cormac set his fork down and folded his hands together. "Celine," he said, his voice even but carrying the weight of unspoken expectation. "You know property taxes are coming up, right?" The shift in tone was immediate. I knew where this was going. "Yes, I know," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Why?" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table toward me. "You always take care of this, don't you?" I stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. There it was. Not a request, not a discussion, just the expectation that I would handle it, like I always had. Something inside me clenched. The words echoed in my mind. I always take care of this. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, one I had never truly questioned until now. Vesper let out a sigh, finally looking up from her phone. "It's just taxes, Celine," she said with a casual shrug. "You have more money than you need." I turned to her, my patience thinning. "I've already paid over $100,000 in family expenses. Why can't someone else step up for once?" Vesper blinked, then frowned. "Dad has the money, obviously," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "My trust fund's been set up for years." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. A slow, creeping sensation crawled up my spine. A trust fund? I turned my gaze to Cormac. His expression darkened instantly. "That's enough, Vesper," he snapped. But it was already too late. My mind raced. My father had always told me that finances were tight, that we had to be mindful of spending. But if there was enough money for a trust fund, one substantial enough for my sister to casually bring it up, then why had I been led to believe otherwise? Dinner continued, but I barely tasted my food. My thoughts were elsewhere, pieces clicking together in a way I didn't like. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself pacing the hallway. I wasn't the kind of person to go digging. but something about Vesper's words wouldn't leave me alone. I walked past my father's office. The door was slightly ajar. A small voice in my head told me to keep walking. I didn't. The room was neat, controlled, just like him. My eyes scanned the shelves, the desk, the small safe tucked in the corner. I knew where he kept the key. Hands shaking slightly, I reached into the drawer and found it. The safe clicked open. Inside was a stack of documents, but my eyes landed on one immediately. A thick folder with a name stamped on the front in bold letters. Vesper Draven, Trust Fund. I flipped it open, scanning numbers that made my breath catch in my throat. $1.2 million. I gripped the paper tightly, my pulse roaring in my ears. All these years, I had been paying for everything. Taxes, repairs, family vacations, even Vesper's car payments. And all along, my father had been securing my sister's future behind my back. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, staring at the truth in black and white. By the time I returned to my room, my decision was made. The next morning, I stormed into the dining room, the folder clenched in my hand. Cormac looked up from his coffee, barely blinking as I dropped the papers onto the table. "Explain this," I demanded. He didn't even glance down. Instead, he exhaled through his nose, slow and measured. "You had no right to go through my things," he said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I had every right after years of being manipulated," I shot back. "You've been lying to me, using me." His gaze hardened. "You're successful, Celine. Vesper needs more help." I had expected some excuse, some justification, but the sheer coldness of his logic stunned me into silence. And that's when I knew. Nothing I said would change his mind. I set my jaw, lifting my chin. "I'm done paying," I said quietly, but firmly. "For anything." Cormac's expression didn't change, but the shift in his demeanor told me one thing. I had just declared war. Vesper sat up straighter, finally sensing that something irreversible had just happened. Silence stretched between us, thick and unrelenting. My father's face remained eerily composed, the picture of control. He wasn't shocked, wasn't apologetic. If anything, there was a quiet calculation behind his eyes. He was already deciding how to handle me. "You're overreacting, Celine," he said, his voice level, as if I had just complained about a misplaced dinner order, rather than years of lies. I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Overreacting?" My fingers curled around the document I had slammed onto the table minutes before. "You made me believe we were struggling. You let me pay for everything while secretly giving Vesper over $1 million. Across from me, Vesper scoffed, rolling her eyes as if I were being dramatic. "Why do you always make things about you, Celine?" she muttered, folding her arms over her chest. I turned to her, stunned. She wasn't even trying to deny it. Cormac sighed, leaning back in his chair with the air of a man who had far more important things to deal with than my outburst. "You're the responsible one. That's why we trusted you to help." The words landed like a slap. Trusted me? Trusted me to what? Be their personal bank? Sacrifice my future so they wouldn't have to? I shook my head, exhaling sharply. "That wasn't trust. That was using me." Cormac's gaze sharpened. "And we never forced you. You did it because you wanted to." A tight knot of frustration coiled in my stomach. This was how it always went. He twisted things just enough to make me question myself. "You've done so well for yourself, Selena," he continued, his voice calm, reasonable. "We never wanted to burden you, but you insisted on helping. Isn't that true?" I opened my mouth, then hesitated. I had offered to help, hadn't I? I had stepped in, had written the checks, had kept my mouth shut even when it stung. But that wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I thought they needed me. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice soft, almost gentle. "Your father had to think about everyone's future, Celine," she said, as if she were comforting a child. "Vesper needed more security. You've always been independent." I gritted my teeth. I wasn't independent. I was abandoned. Vesper let out an incredulous laugh, shaking her head. God, you are so dramatic. I turned to her, my patience fraying. You needed help? Vesper, you went to private school, had a brand new car at 16, and traveled every summer while I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. So what? I didn't ask for any of that. I didn't ask you to be jealous. Jealous. The word settled in my chest like ice. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself, because I realized then that Vesper wasn't capable of seeing the truth. To her, my anger was an attack. My exhaustion was jealousy. My pain was selfishness. Fine, she snapped when I didn't respond. If you hate me that much, I'll just disappear from your life. Cormac's gaze flicked to her, and then, just like that, he saw his opening. See what you've done, Celine? He said smoothly, turning his attention back to me. This isn't about money, it's about family, and you're breaking us apart. I let out a slow breath, and then something inside me clicked into place. You already broke this family, I said, my voice steady. I just finally opened my eyes. Silence. I pushed back from the table and stood, my legs feeling unsteady. Eleanor reached for me, her fingers brushing my wrist. Celine, wait! I pulled away before she could say anything else. Don't, I said quietly. I know where I stand now. Cormac's voice followed me as I turned toward the door. If you walk out now, don't expect to come back when you realize your mistake. I hesitated only for a second before reaching for the handle. I'm not the one making a mistake, I said. Then I stepped outside. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being alone. The sound of my phone buzzing in my pocket snapped me out of my thoughts. I already knew who it was. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I drove down the darkened road back to my apartment. My hands ached from how tightly I held it, but I didn't let go. My heart was still pounding from what had just happened, the confrontation replaying in my mind, like a scene I couldn't escape. My phone vibrated again. Another call. I ignored it. The glow of the dashboard clock told me it was almost midnight, but I didn't feel tired. Instead, there was a dull, persistent ache sitting heavy in my chest. Did I overreact? The question gnawed at the edges of my thoughts, unwelcome but impossible to ignore. I had just cut off my family, over money. Or was it more than that? Another vibration. This time, I glanced down. 3 missed calls from Eleanor. A few unread texts from Vesper, likely dripping with self-righteous indignation. Nothing from my father. That silence was louder than anything else. I parked outside my apartment, resting my forehead against the steering wheel for a moment, before exhaling sharply. I could still hear Cormac's voice in my head, the way he dismissed me so effortlessly, as if I was the irrational one, as if I had no right to be angry. My phone rang again. Eleanor. I hesitated before answering. Celine, sweetheart, she said immediately, her voice softer than usual. Your father isn't taking this well. I let out a humorless laugh, leaning back against my seat. Oh, I'm sure he's devastated. Don't be like that, she chided, the same way she had when I was a child, refusing to eat my vegetables. You know how he is. He just wants to take care of us all. I closed my eyes. That word again. Care. As if manipulation was a form of love. Take care of who, Mom? Me, or just Vesper? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before continuing. Don't make this about money, Celine. Family is more important than that. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers against my temple. That's exactly why I'm doing this. There was silence on the other end, long enough that I could hear her breathing, like she was searching for the right thing to say. But I wasn't interested in whatever excuse was coming next. Before she could respond, I hung up. The weight in my chest shifted. It didn't disappear, but it settled differently, like something that wasn't mine to carry anymore. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, but this time, it wasn't Eleanor. Cassius. I hesitated before picking up. Cass, now's not a good time. You need to know something, he said, his voice low, urgent. Uncle Cormac, he's not done with you yet. I sat up straighter, my stomach tightening. What do you mean? He's been making calls, talking to the family, spinning the story. Cassius paused, then sighed. He's saying you abandoned us, that you're selfish. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening around the phone. Of course he was. And you? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Do you believe him? There was a moment of silence before Cassius finally said, No. But Celine, you need to be careful. He's planning something. I turned my gaze to the reflection in my window. My own face stared back at me, but I barely recognized it. There was no sadness in my eyes anymore. No hesitation. Just the slow, simmering burn of something that had been waiting to surface for years. I had spent so long wanting to believe they cared about me, that they valued me. But the truth was simple. They only valued what I could do for them. I took a deep breath and sent Cassius one final message. If he wants a fight, he's got one. The war had begun, and I wasn't backing down this time. The first shot came the next morning, an email from my father's lawyer. I barely registered the sunlight filtering through my blinds as I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, squinting at the unfamiliar sender. Subject: Urgent, financial dispute, Draven Family Trust. A cold wave of dread settled in my stomach as I opened it. Dear Ms. Draven, your recent refusal to uphold financial commitments to the family has resulted in undue hardship. I sat up abruptly, scanning the rest of the letter. Legal jargon wrapped around one central message. They were trying to make my decision a contractual obligation. I scrolled further. Cormac had retained a law firm to evaluate the financial responsibilities traditionally maintained by all Draven family members. Evaluate. A dressed-up way of saying he was trying to force my hand through legal pressure. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about power. His power over me. I dialed Lucian's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Celine? He answered, still groggy. I exhaled sharply. I think my father is trying to sue me. That woke him up. What? I forwarded him the email. A pause followed as he scanned it. They're testing you, he said finally, seeing if you'll cave before they escalate. I tightened my grip on the phone. They're underestimating me. Before I could even process the email, my phone rang again. This time, it was my aunt. Celine, you need to come to the lake house. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was going. What's happening now? I asked, voice flat. Your father is calling a family meeting, she said, the words dripping with something that sounded like forced concern. We need to talk about all of this, face to face. A setup. I should have ignored it. But if I let them paint me as the villain without even showing up, they'd have more leverage. I grabbed my coat. Fine, I'm on my way. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I'd walked into an ambush. Every single Draven relative was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the ones who had never once called me unless they needed something. They were all seated, their expressions ranging from judgment to forced sympathy. Cormac stood in the center, like a king addressing his court. You're breaking this family apart, he said, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher. I folded my arms. I'm setting boundaries. His gaze darkened. Boundaries? Since when does family need boundaries? One by one, the others chimed in. We've always supported you. Your sister needs you. What kind of daughter turns her back on family? I clenched my fists, scanning their faces. This wasn't about family. This was about control. I inhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. Funny. I don't recall anyone caring about me when I was the one paying the bills. Silence. Cormac took a step closer, lowering his voice. This isn't about money, he said smoothly. It's about unity. You're making a mistake, Celine. I tilted my head. I think my bank account would disagree. His expression flickered for just a second. Then he sighed. exasperated, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. If this is the path you want to take, don't expect us to clean up your mess when you come running back. I smiled coldly. I won't. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't stop driving until I reached a coffee shop downtown. I needed space, needed air. As I stepped inside and ordered a coffee, I pulled out my phone and checked my banking app out of habit. Declined. I frowned, refreshing the page. A message flashed across the screen. This account has been temporarily frozen due to administrative action. I inhaled sharply, switching to my investment accounts. A few transactions were missing. Panic surged through me as my phone buzzed. Lucian! Celine, he said the second I answered. I was about to call you. My accounts, I said, gripping the counter. They're locked. Lucian's voice was tight. Your father still has influence in certain financial circles. He's trying to cut you off. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing the panic down. Of course. This was his move. Not a lawsuit, not a meeting. This. He was making sure I couldn't stand on my own. My hands shook as I stared at my reflection in the coffee shop window. He wanted me to crawl back. I wouldn't. Lucian, I said, my voice steely, start an audit. I want every traceable transaction on my accounts. Find out exactly how he did this. A pause. Then, you got it. I ended the call and texted Cassius. They've frozen my money. I need to know everything Cormac is planning. No more waiting. No more hoping they'd come around. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. I was preparing for war. Cormac thought he could control me forever. He was wrong. If my father wanted a fight, I was about to show him just how much of his daughter I really was. I spent the night going through my financial records, sorting every document that proved just how much I had poured into my family over the years. The numbers were staggering, far more than I had ever let myself calculate before. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. I had sacrificed everything while Cormac built a future for Vesper. And now he was trying to erase my independence by freezing my accounts. I wouldn't let him. My phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. Hours later, when I finally glanced at the screen, I saw a name I didn't expect. Vesper. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to pick up. I swiped to answer. What do you want? Silence. Then a shaky breath. Celine, please, I don't know what to do. I froze. Vesper never sounded like this. She was always confident, always smug, always on the winning side of our father's favoritism. What's wrong, Vesper? I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated before whispering, Dad's mad. He says I should have never let anything slip. My grip tightened on the phone. Of course. Cormac wasn't angry about the betrayal. He was angry because she had been sloppy enough to let me find out the truth. And my trust fund, Vesper continued, her voice cracking. It's not what I thought. I don't have access like I thought I would. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Oh, I said, my tone sharp. So now you know what it feels like to be manipulated? Vesper inhaled sharply. I messed up, okay? But please don't shut me out. You don't know what he's like when he's really angry. Something in her voice sent a chill through me. She was afraid. For the first time, I realized that even she wasn't untouchable. Cormac's control didn't come with love. It came with conditions. The moment she stopped being useful, she was just another liability to him. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Then figure it out, I said, my voice unwavering. Just like I had to. And I hung up. The knock at my door came late that afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, but something in my gut twisted before I even reached the handle. When I opened it, a man in a navy suit stood there, holding an envelope. Celine Draven? I already knew what this was. You've been served. I took the envelope, my pulse steady despite the rage simmering beneath my skin. I waited until the door clicked shut before tearing it open. Plaintiff, Cormac Draven, defendant, Celine Draven. The document was a formal complaint, accusing me of financial negligence toward the family. Negligence. He was trying to argue that I had an ongoing financial duty to support them. I let out a slow breath, reading through the legal jargon. This wasn't a real lawsuit, it was a power play, a way to put pressure on me, to scare me into submission. But Cormac had miscalculated something. I wasn't scared anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Alaric, my attorney. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. My father just served me legal papers. There was a rustling on the other end. Send them over, I'll take a look. I forwarded the documents while pacing the room, my free hand clenched into a fist. A few minutes later, Alaric let out a low, unimpressed laugh. This is absurd, he said. It won't hold up in court. I know, I muttered, but that's not the point, is it? No, he agreed. It's about intimidation. I exhaled, forcing my mind to slow down. Cormac wasn't expecting me to fight this. He thought I'd crumble, that I'd pay him off just to avoid the hassle, but he had underestimated just how done I was. Then let's make him regret trying, I said. That night, I sat across from Alaric and Lucian in a private office downtown. Alaric flipped through the legal papers, shaking his head. We'll counter with financial records proving you've already paid them over $100,000. This suit won't hold up. Lucian, my financial advisor, leaned forward. And I've begun tracing some interesting transactions on your father's accounts. I raised a brow. What kind of transactions? Lucian's smirk was sharp. He's been moving money, fast. It looks like he's trying to secure assets before anything escalates. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. He was trying to protect himself. I tapped my fingers against the table. Good, I murmured. Let's hit him where it hurts. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power. For years, I had played by his rules. I had given, sacrificed, complied. Now I was going to show him exactly what happened when he pushed me too far. My father thought he could keep me under his thumb. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The first crack in my father's carefully built empire came just 2 days later. I was sitting at my desk, staring at legal documents Alaric had sent over, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Your father isn't as untouchable as he thinks. I frowned, my fingers hovering over the screen. Who is this? I typed back. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then finally, Dorian Draven. I leaned back in my chair, my stomach twisting. I hadn't heard that name in years. Dorian was my uncle, Cormac's younger brother. The black sheep of the Draven family. The one who had disappeared from family gatherings. The one Cormac never spoke about unless it was to remind everyone how ungrateful and reckless he was. What did he want now? Another message popped up. Meet me at the old pier. Sunset. It's about your father. I hesitated. Every instinct told me this could be a setup. But then again, Cormac didn't need Dorian to set me up. He had already made his move with the lawsuit and the financial freeze. If Dorian had information, I needed to hear it. Fine. The old pier was empty when I arrived. The wooden planks creaked beneath my feet as I walked toward the railing, scanning the horizon. The sun was bleeding into the water, turning the sky a burnt orange. Then, footsteps behind me. I turned to find Dorian standing a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his worn leather jacket. He looked older than I remembered. Leaner, sharper, like a man who had seen things. He studied me for a moment before nodding. You look just like your mother. I crossed my arms. If you called me here to reminisce, I'm leaving. Dorian smirked. Same fire, too. I didn't respond. He sighed, leaning against the railing. I stayed out of family affairs for years, but I can't sit by and watch Cormac ruin you. I narrowed my eyes. And why do you care? Because, he said, reaching into his jacket, I know where your father's real money is. He pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the wooden ledge between us. I hesitated for only a second before picking it up and flipping it open. The first page made my breath catch. Offshore accounts, hidden transactions, shell companies. I flipped through, my heart pounding. The numbers were staggering, millions, hidden in places my father never wanted anyone to find. I looked up at Dorian, my pulse hammering. "He's been hiding assets," I said. Dorian nodded. "And if you expose this, his case against you falls apart." I inhaled sharply, staring at the papers in my hands. Cormac's lawsuit was built on the argument that I had a financial obligation to the family. But this proved that he had more than enough to cover anything himself. More than that, it proved he had been lying. Not just to me, but to everyone. I closed the folder. "Why are you giving this to me?" Dorian's smirk faded. "Because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of Cormac's wrath." His jaw tightened. "And because it's about time someone knocked him off his throne." I studied him for a moment, searching for the angle. But I didn't find one. Dorian wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted to see Cormac lose. I could work with that. An hour later, I sat across from Alaric and Lucian, the folder open on the table between us. Alaric whistled low, flipping through the pages. "This is damning." Lucian leaned forward, his eyes alight with intrigue. "If this is legit, your father isn't just in trouble with you. He could be in trouble with the IRS. I arched a brow. "How much trouble?" Lucian tapped a page with a highlighted wire transfer. "Enough to make him sweat. If he's been funneling money through shell companies, it's only a matter of time before the government notices." Alaric set the folder down, steepling his fingers. "We can use this in negotiations. If he keeps pushing, we push back harder." I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't on the defensive. I was in control. A slow, sharp smile spread across my face. "Then let's see how much he enjoys being the one on defense." Cormac built his empire on control. It was time for me to take that away from him. The first warning shot came through a simple email, one that made my father's carefully built world start to tremble. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over my keyboard, rereading the subject line one last time. The truth about Cormac Draven's money. Attached were the financial documents Dorian had given me, offshore accounts, hidden assets, money funneled through layers of shell companies. Proof that my father had been lying not just to me, but to everyone who had ever believed in his carefully crafted illusion of financial struggle. I had considered waiting, strategizing my next move, but then I remembered the lawsuit, the frozen accounts, the way he had turned my own family against me. This couldn't wait. I took a deep breath, my pulse steady. Then, with a single click, I sent the email to every Draven relative, the ones who had accused me of being selfish, the ones who blindly followed Cormac, the ones who needed to see the truth for themselves. The moment it hit their inboxes, my phone exploded with notifications. Cassius called first. I answered on the second ring. "Celine!" he hissed, his voice tight with urgency. "What the hell did you just do?" I leaned back in my chair. "I told the truth." Cassius exhaled sharply. "You don't get it. They're losing it. The whole family is in chaos. People are calling each other, trying to figure out what's real and what isn't." I smiled coldly. "Good." By the time Cassius finished explaining the fallout, I could practically hear the panic through the phone. Cormac was furious. He had spent decades making himself the head of the Draven family, the one everyone turned to, the one they trusted. And now, his empire was crumbling in real time. "He's trying to do damage control," Cassius continued, his voice low. "But the numbers don't lie, Celine. This isn't just gossip. This is proof." I pictured it. Cormac pacing in his office, barking orders into the phone, trying to convince his loyalists that I was the villain. "Some of the aunts and uncles are backing off," Cassius added. "You know what they're saying? He told us the family was struggling. That's why we defended him." I let out a bitter laugh. "And now they're realizing they were nothing but pawns." Cassius hesitated. Not all of them. Some still think you're the problem, that you've humiliated him. Of course, some people would never accept the truth, even when it was staring them in the face. Then my phone buzzed again. Another incoming call. Eleanor. I clenched my jaw. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to hear it. I took a slow breath and picked up. Hello, Mother. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Celine, she whispered, her voice unsteady. How could you? The sheer disbelief in her tone sent a flash of irritation through me. I gripped my phone. How could I? I repeated, my voice turning cold. How could you? How could you let him do this for years? Eleanor's breath hitched. It's not that simple. It is, I shot back. You knew. Maybe not the details, but you knew what he was doing wasn't right. And you let it happen. She didn't deny it, but she didn't admit it either. Instead, she said the one thing that infuriated me more than anything else. You've gone too far, Celine. A cold laugh escaped my lips. No, Mom, I haven't gone far enough. And with that, I ended the call. That night, as I sat in my apartment, a final message came in. From Cormac. It was short, chilling. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming next. I stared at the words, my grip tightening around my phone. For the first time, a sliver of unease crept in. Not because I was afraid of him financially. That battle was already turning in my favor. This was different. Cormac was desperate now, and a desperate man was unpredictable. I stood up, walking to my front door and sliding the deadbolt into place, because I knew his next move wouldn't just be financial. It would be personal. The first sign that my father had truly lost control came the next morning when I opened my front door to find an eviction notice taped to it. For a moment, I just stared at it, my brain struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Eviction? I lived alone. I paid my bills on time. There was no reason. Then, like a slow, creeping shadow, the realization settled in. This wasn't about missed payments. This was him. I snatched the paper off the door, my eyes scanning the fine print. Leased property owner, Cormac Draven. I inhaled sharply, my grip tightening around the paper. Of course. My father owned the apartment complex. I had never even thought about it before, never questioned how easily my lease had been approved. But now he was terminating my lease as another move in his twisted game. My phone was in my hand before I even realized I had grabbed it. I dialed my landlord's number, pressing the phone to my ear. He picked up on the third ring. Ms. Draven. His voice was hesitant. He already knew why I was calling. I forced my voice to stay calm. There's been a mistake. I just found an eviction notice on my door. A pause. Then, it's not a mistake. Ice settled in my veins. What? Another pause. Then, finally, he sighed. Your father owns the property, and he's terminating your lease effective immediately. I closed my eyes. Of course he is. I exhaled slowly, my pulse pounding. I see. I'm sorry, my landlord added quickly, his tone softer. I really am. But there's nothing I can do. There never was. Without another word, I ended the call and set the phone down on the counter, pressing my hands against the surface as I tried to breathe through the anger threatening to consume me. He thought he could break me like this. Not today. The knock on my door came later that afternoon. I wasn't expecting company, but when I swung the door open, I found Vesper standing there. And she looked like hell. Her usual flawless appearance was gone. Her hair was a mess, her clothes disheveled, her eyes rimmed red. She looked at me like she barely recognized me, like she didn't know whether I was her enemy or her last chance. I folded my arms. What do you want? Vesper opened her mouth, then hesitated. Then, in a shaky, broken voice, she whispered, It's gone. I frowned. What's gone? She let out a trembling breath, gripping the doorframe like she needed something solid to hold on to. The money, she choked out. Everything. I didn't react. Not at first. I just stared at her, waiting for the inevitable punchline. You mean the trust fund? I asked, voice flat. The one that wasn't a big deal? Vesper flinched. She looked at me, desperate, pleading. You don't get it, she said, her voice raw. Dad drained it to cover himself. The words hit me like a slap. I blinked. Wait, you're saying the trust fund wasn't even for you? She shook her head quickly, biting her lip, realizing the truth herself as she said it out loud. He told me it was mine, she whispered, that it was for my future. But it was never really mine, was it? It never was. I let out a slow, bitter breath. She was just another pawn, just like I had been. I should have felt sorry for her. Maybe part of me did. But another part wanted her to know, to really understand, what it felt like to have everything you had been promised ripped away in an instant. I stepped back, meeting her tear-filled gaze. Welcome to reality, Vesper. Then I shut the door. An hour later, I sat across from Alaric and Lucien, my mind sharper than it had been in weeks. Lucien smirked as he flipped through the newest reports on my father's accounts. Your father is burning through money faster than I thought, he said, amused. This isn't just about you anymore. He's trying to save himself. I leaned forward. How bad is it? Lucien turned a page. If he keeps moving money like this, he won't last another 6 months without something collapsing. I let that sink in. 6 months. Cormac had spent years building an empire of control. And now? It was slipping through his fingers. Alaric, who had been scanning the legal documents in front of him, let out a low hum. If he's desperate enough to drain Vesper's trust fund, he's losing control. I exhaled. He was crumbling. And for the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. I met their eyes, my voice steady. Then let's push him over the edge. My father had spent years making me believe I was powerless. Now it was time to show him how wrong he was. The first step in my plan came with a simple move, taking back something that should have been mine all along. I walked into Alaric's office, setting down a thick stack of documents on his desk. He glanced up from his computer, raising an eyebrow as he reached for them. What's this? I took a seat across from him, crossing my legs. Proof that I've paid the property taxes on the lake house for 5 years. Alaric flipped through the pages, scanning the records with a slow, deliberate nod. When he reached the final document, he let out a low whistle. You want to challenge ownership? I leaned forward, my voice steady. That house is as much mine as it is his. Technically, the house was still under my father's name, but legally, I had grounds to fight for it. I had shouldered every financial burden while he had hoarded money in secret accounts. If he wanted to play dirty, I was more than willing to throw the first legal punch. Alaric smirked. You might have a case, and even if we don't win, filing a legal claim will put pressure on him. I exhaled slowly. That was the real goal. This wasn't just about a house. This was about sending a message. I was done letting him take from me. I was still in Alaric's office when my phone buzzed. Lucien's name flashed across the screen. I answered immediately. What's wrong? I asked, my fingers tightening around the phone. Lucien's voice was sharp, urgent. Celine, your father is under investigation. The air around me shifted. I sat up straighter. For what? Lucien let out a breath. Dorian's files. They were enough for authorities to take notice. I gripped the phone. Who's looking into him? The IRS. A slow, cold smile spread across my lips. For years, my father had moved money through hidden channels, convinced no one would ever catch him. But Dorian's documents had done more than just expose his personal deception. It had sent a red flag straight to the authorities. This isn't just about you anymore, Lucien continued. This is big. If the investigation digs deep enough, he could be in serious legal trouble. For the first time, my father was truly vulnerable. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something shift inside me. This was the moment he started to lose everything. And I wasn't going to stop it. I was going to watch it happen. The pounding on my apartment door came that night. I knew who it was before I even looked. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door to find Cormac standing there, his face red with fury. He pushed past me before I could say anything, storming into my living room like he still owned everything I touched. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice shaking. I shut the door behind me, slowly turning to face him. I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. "I think," I said, my voice calm, "you're finally out of moves." His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You have no idea what you've done." I tilted my head. "Haven't I?" He took a step closer, his rage barely contained. But I didn't move. For years, this man had dictated my life, had controlled me, manipulated me, made me believe that without him, I had nothing. But now the truth was clear. It was him who was losing. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. And that meant I was finally winning. I didn't expect his next move to come so soon, and I certainly didn't expect it to be this dangerous. The pounding on my door jolted me awake. It wasn't the frantic knock of a friend or the hesitant rap of a neighbor. This was forceful, purposeful, a demand. I swung my legs off the bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mind, still fogged with sleep, scrambled through possibilities. Had Cormac finally lost it? I pulled the door open just enough to see who was standing outside. A process server. My stomach dropped. "Ms. Draven?" he asked, his tone neutral, professional. He extended an envelope toward me. "You've been served." I took it with unsteady hands, my fingers tightening around the thick packet of legal documents. The words on the front page hit me like a brick to the chest. Plaintiff, Cormac Draven. Defendant, Celine Draven. I forced myself to keep reading. He was suing me for defamation and financial damages, claiming I had sabotaged the family business with my accusations, that my public exposure of his finances had led to irreparable losses. I exhaled slowly. This was his final legal attack, not because he had any chance of winning, but because he wanted to bury me in court battles, to drain my resources, to make me suffer. But as I stood in my doorway, gripping that lawsuit, something inside me shifted. He's trying to scare me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid. I pulled out my phone and dialed Alaric. He picked up immediately. "I was expecting your call." I let out a humorless laugh. "You already saw the papers?" "Yeah," he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "And your father just made a mistake." I frowned. "How?" "Because he just put himself under an even bigger microscope. Defamation cases require proof. And guess what? The only thing he has are financial documents that are already under federal investigation." I inhaled sharply. He was right. Cormac's desperation had just backfired, and I was about to use it against him. That evening, another knock came at my door. This time, it wasn't a process server. It was Vesper. I hesitated for only a moment before opening the door. She looked broken. Her usual confidence, her perfect composure, it was gone. Her eyes were red, her posture slumped, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't say anything, I just stepped aside. She walked in without a word and sank onto my couch, staring blankly at the floor. "Everything's falling apart, Celine," she whispered after a long silence. I crossed my arms. "It already fell apart, Vesper. You're just finally seeing it." She swallowed hard. "He's not the same." I studied her carefully. "He never was. You just didn't see it before." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with something raw. "I don't know how to survive without him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were like an echo of my own past, of the fear I had felt before I finally let go. But I wasn't going to save her. Not this time. She had to learn, just like I did. "Then it's time to figure it out," I said. She didn't argue. She just nodded, like she finally understood that no one was coming to rescue her. That night, the tension in my chest should have eased. It didn't. I was winning, but it still felt like something was waiting. Something unfinished. And then, a sound outside my window. I froze. Slowly, I stepped toward the blinds, heart pounding. Peeking through the slats, my breath caught in my throat. My father was standing outside. Not knocking, not yelling, just standing there, watching. A slow, sickening chill crawled down my spine. This isn't about money anymore. This was about control. I snatched my phone and dialed Cassius. The second he answered, I whispered, "He's here." Silence. Then, "Shit, lock your doors. I'm on my way." I pressed the deadbolt into place, my hand shaking. For the first time, I truly felt unsafe. I had taken everything from him, his power, his money, his control. But a desperate man is a dangerous one. The knock at my door came just after midnight, and I knew this time it wasn't my father. I still held the baseball bat in my hands as I approached the door, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The apartment was silent, except for the steady thudding against the wood. I hesitated, then peeked through the peephole. Cassius. Relief hit me so fast, it nearly knocked me off balance. I unlatched the deadbolt and yanked open the door. "I thought it was him," I admitted, my voice raw. Cassius stepped inside without hesitation, locking the door behind him. His expression was tense, his eyes scanning my apartment like he expected my father to materialize out of the shadows. "It's worse than I thought, Celine," he said grimly. "He's unraveling." I tightened my grip on the bat. I already knew that. "What happened?" I demanded. Cassius hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "I need you to hear this." Cassius hit play. A voice crackled through the speaker, deep, familiar. "Dorian. I have financial records proving Cormac has committed fraud," his voice said, low and urgent. "Offshore accounts, fake investments. If you push him, he'll break." I sucked in a sharp breath. Fraud? This wasn't just hidden money. This was illegal. Cassius locked eyes with me. "Dorian was careful, but he's been holding on to this for years. He was waiting for the right time." I swallowed, my mind racing. "If we release this—" Cassius nodded. "It won't just ruin him, Celine. It could send him to prison." I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me. Cormac had been untouchable for decades, a man who built an empire on lies and control, who convinced everyone, including me, that he would always win. But now, I had everything I needed to end him. My fingers curled into fists. "Then let's make sure he does." My phone rang. I flinched at the sudden sound, my pulse spiking. When I saw the name on the screen, my stomach twisted. "Mom!" Cassius frowned. "Don't answer it!" But something in my gut told me I had to. I swiped to accept the call. "Mom?" Her voice was trembling. "Celine! He's coming for you!" My blood turned to ice. "What?" "He knows what you're doing," she sobbed. "He says if he's going down, he's taking you with him." I clenched my jaw. "Did he threaten me?" Silence. Then, "He didn't have to." Cassius reached for my phone. I shook my head, gripping it tighter. I inhaled slowly, steadying my voice. "Let him come," I said, my voice steel. "I'm ready." I had taken his power, his wealth, his reputation. Now I was about to take his freedom. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with one goal: ending this once and for all. Alaric was already waiting for me, a fresh cup of coffee in front of him, stacks of paperwork spread across his desk. He looked up as I entered, studying me carefully. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. I nodded, setting my bag down. "We go public." Alaric exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I met his gaze, my shoulders squaring. I don't want to turn back. This was it, the final strike, the one that would bury Cormac. I pulled out the files, the full record of his offshore accounts, illegal transfers, fraudulent loans. Everything Dorian had uncovered, everything my father had spent years hiding. Alaric's expression was unreadable as he flipped through the pages. "This is solid," he admitted. "The press will tear him apart. The feds will have no choice but to dig deeper." "Good," I said, "because I want the world to see exactly who he is." The headlines hit within hours. Prominent businessman under federal investigation. Cormac Draven accused of fraud, embezzlement, and financial crimes. Draven Empire in freefall after shocking revelations. It was everywhere. The media pounced, picking apart every shady transaction, every questionable business deal. Investigators began circling, faster than even I had expected. I watched the chaos unfold from my apartment, the news flashing across the screen, social media buzzing with speculation. Then my phone rang. I didn't have to check the caller ID. I knew it was him. I answered. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, "You just signed your own death sentence." His voice was low, laced with a fury so sharp it almost cut through the line. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I leaned back, gripping the phone tightly. My voice was steady. "No, Dad. I just signed yours." The fallout was immediate. Eleanor refused to speak to me. Vesper showed up at my door, her face pale, her voice small. "Did you really have to destroy him?" I didn't flinch. "He did that to himself." Vesper opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like understanding. Cassius, standing in the corner, shook his head in disbelief. "You actually did it." I met his gaze. "I told you I would." For the first time, Cormac had no control. But that didn't mean he wouldn't try to take me down with him. The next morning, I woke up to a news alert. Cormac had been arrested. My phone screen glowed in the dim light of my apartment. My fingers trembled slightly as I unlocked it, scrolling through the breaking news banner. Prominent businessman Cormac Draven arrested for fraud and tax evasion. I sucked in a sharp breath and quickly reached for the remote, turning on the TV. The screen flickered to life, and there it was. Live footage of my father being led out of his office in handcuffs. His normally polished suit was wrinkled, his face set in an unreadable expression as he was escorted into a police vehicle. A swarm of reporters shouted questions at him, cameras flashing in rapid bursts. "Mr. Draven, do you have anything to say about the charges? Are you denying the allegations? What about the offshore accounts? The missing funds?" Cormac didn't respond. He just kept walking, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of my couch. This is it. This is what I fought for. I had won. So why did it feel hollow? I barely had time to process before the next storm arrived. A loud bang rattled my apartment door. I barely had time to stand before it swung open and Vesper stormed inside. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale with fury, her hands shaking as she slammed the door behind her. "You ruined everything!" she screamed. I stared at her, unfazed. "I saved myself!" Vesper let out a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. "Saved yourself? You burned everything to the ground!" I crossed my arms. "No, Vesper, he did. I just refused to keep covering for him." Tears welled in her eyes. "What am I supposed to do now, Celine?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I held her gaze, my tone softer but firm. "Figure it out," I said. Just like I did. She let out a choked sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. For the first time, I saw it. Real fear. Not of losing money, not of losing comfort, but of having no one left to clean up the mess. She shook her head, backing toward the door. "You think you're better than all of us?" I sighed. "No, Vesper. I just finally stopped letting him break me." She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she just turned and walked out. And this time, I didn't stop her. I checked my phone again, half expecting a message from Eleanor. It never came. For hours, I waited. I convinced myself she just needed time, that she would reach out. Finally, I gave in and sent the first message. "Mom, are you okay?" The 3 dots appeared. I held my breath. Then, they disappeared. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. She chose him over me. I closed my phone, the realization settling in. I had won the battle, but some wars don't end cleanly. The first sign that my father wasn't done with me came in the form of a letter, one written from prison. I found it in my mailbox, a plain white envelope with his name in the return address. My stomach twisted as I held it in my hands, my fingers cold despite the warm morning air. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I carried it inside and sat at my kitchen table, staring at it for far too long before finally tearing it open. The letter was handwritten, his neat, precise script filling the page. "Celine, I always knew you were strong. But strength is a dangerous thing when it blinds you. You don't see the full picture yet. You think you've won, but you never stop to ask yourself, what did I let you win? There's more at play than you understand. And when you finally see it, it'll be too late. Love, Dad." My hands clenched around the paper. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. And I had no idea what it meant. I spent the rest of the morning trying to shake off the unease, but it clung to me like a second skin. I forced myself to move on with my day. But then, my phone buzzed. "Lucian." I answered immediately. "What's wrong?" His voice was tense. "We found something in your father's financials." I went still. "What do you mean?" Lucian exhaled sharply. "Before his arrest, Cormac moved a significant amount of money into an account under your name." I stopped breathing. "What?" Lucian's voice turned grim. "He set it up to make it look like you were involved. If the investigation digs into this, it won't just be about him anymore." My pulse pounded. This was it, the last move in his twisted game. Even from behind bars, he was still trying to control me. I had no choice. I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to hear him say it. The prison was cold, sterile, the walls too bright, too white. I sat across from the only man I had ever feared, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't untouchable anymore. Cormac smiled, leaning back in his seat, completely at ease. "You finally came." I folded my arms. "You tried to ruin me, even from in here." His smile didn't falter. "I only gave you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." I clenched my jaw. He was still pretending this was a lesson, a game. "No, Dad. What I do now is up to me." For the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not anger, not amusement, defeat. I had finally won. I walked out of that prison without looking back. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The final battle wasn't against my father. It was against the version of me he had created. I sat in my apartment, staring at the city lights. The distant hum of traffic filled the silence, the glow of the skyline stretching endlessly before me. Everything should have felt like a victory. Cormac was gone, his empire crumbling, his influence shattered. But instead, there was emptiness. For years, my life had revolved around fighting him, proving myself, defying him, escaping him. Now that it was over, I found myself asking the question I had avoided for so long. Did I win? Or did I just destroy the only family I had left? My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me from my thoughts. "Cassius." "You did the right thing, Celine." I exhaled, staring at the message. Did I? I wasn't sure. The next morning, I made a final choice. I walked into a small coffee shop, my coat wrapped tightly around me, and saw Vesper already waiting. She looked different, less polished, more fragile. I slid into the seat across from her. She met my gaze. "So, is this it?" I nodded. "I can't keep saving you, or Mom, or Dad. We all have to live with our choices." Her hands curled around her coffee cup, her knuckles white. "I don't know how to live without him," she admitted. I didn't flinch. "Then start learning." Her eyes welled with tears, but she nodded. For the first time, she understood. I wasn't coming back. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand once. Then I stood and walked away. I didn't look back. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Lucien in his office. A stack of papers sat between us, the final legal document severing my financial ties to the Draven name. He slid a pen toward me. "This is it," he said. "Once you sign, you're free." I picked up the pen, pausing for only a moment before signing my name. Lucien smirked. "So, what's next?" I glanced out the window, watching the sunlight pour over the city. "For the first time," I said slowly, smiling, "I don't know." And I loved that. I had spent my life trying to prove my worth to a family that never saw me. Now, I was finally learning how to see myself. Freedom wasn't about escaping my past. It was about choosing my future. The past would always be there, a shadow at my back. But for the first time, I wasn't letting it define me. I was making choices for myself. And the first one came in the form of a voicemail. I saw my mother's name flash across my phone screen that morning. I didn't pick up. Instead, I let it go to voicemail, the weight in my chest heavier than I expected. A part of me had already decided. There was no going back. Still, later that evening, when the apartment was quiet, I played the message. Her voice was hesitant, strained. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted to say I love you." Silence. Then a soft exhale, a voice almost too quiet to hear. "I'm sorry, Celine." I sat there, listening to the message twice, feeling the familiar ache, the pull of what could have been. But some things aren't meant to be fixed. With a deep breath, I deleted the voicemail and chose peace. 2 days later, I stood in front of a real estate office, my fingers tightening around a new set of keys. Lucien leaned against his car, arms crossed, watching me with an amused expression. "So, this is it?" he asked. I turned the key over in my hand, smiling. "Yeah, my first place. That's actually mine." No contracts, no expectations, no debts owed to a man who had spent his life owning me. Just freedom. Lucien let out a low whistle. "Damn! I was half expecting you to change your mind and move to another city." I smirked. "Not yet." "Maybe someday, but not yet." I stepped into my new home, placing a single box on the floor. The space was empty, the walls bare, but instead of feeling overwhelming, it felt full of possibilities. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the kitchen counter. Mine. Everything about this life was mine now. No looking over my shoulder, no waiting for the next demand, no carrying the weight of a family that never truly saw me. Just me, just freedom. I closed my eyes, breathing in the quiet. I didn't escape my past. I reclaimed my future. You know, freedom isn't just about walking away from the past. It's about choosing what comes next. I spent my whole life proving my worth to people who never really saw me. But the truth? I was enough all along. Let this be your reminder. You don't have to stay where you're not valued. You don't have to keep giving to those who only take. You get to choose. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else. It's defined by you. And if this message speaks to you, if you're ready to step into your own power, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning.